Also on tonight's programme, farmers get the go-ahead to shoot badgers in the effort to stop the spread of bovine TB. At 7:25, we'll talk with one farmer in an infection hotspot where the first licence to cull has just been issued. And here in the studio with the badger's best friend, Queen guitarist turned wildlife campaigner, Brian May. Badgers beware. The first full-scale cull of the animals across England could begin within days. The government has issued the first licences allowing farmers to shoot dead thousands of badgers in an effort to protect cattle from bovine TB. Wildlife campaigners are furious. They say that local trials have failed to prove the scientific evidence behind a cull, warning it'll cost far more than it saves. Well, in a minute, the guitarist Brian May debates the cull with a Gloucestershire farmer. But first, here's our science editor, Tom Clark.
Watch out, badgers. The farmer is licensed to kill. Within a month, selected landowners will be allowed to use rifles and shotguns to shoot badgers by night. It marks the end of more than a decade of dispute over whether culling badgers will control bovine tuberculosis, a disease that runs rampant through our cattle herds.
It is enormous. It's hugely costly. It's affecting farmers in virtually all of the west of the country now that have cattle. We just have to deal with the disease properly to get cattle farming to survive, basically.
So will this be the answer? Officials today granted a provisional licence to cull badgers in an area of Gloucestershire. A licence for an area in Somerset is due this week. Badgers must be shot by farmers or hired marksmen. And under the terms of their licence, farmers must kill at least 70%, but not all of the badger population for the next 4 years.
If we don't do this, then we're going to see a continuing spread of the disease. There hasn't been a single country in the world that has effectively borne down on TB without doing something about the reservoirs in the feral population.
TB cases from contact between badgers and cows cost farmers millions. Infected animals and milk must be destroyed. But a 10-year study commissioned by the last government found a cull wouldn't significantly reduce TB. Worse, it found if done badly, it actually spread the disease around. Even under the coalition's cull plans, they estimate a reduction of just 16% in TB cases. Hardly a magic bullet. There's not a lot of evidence shooting badgers will work. And even if it does, it could only lead to a modest reduction in the number of cases of TB in cattle. But what it does do is take the bitter row over culling badgers out of Westminster and onto the farm. The veiled message from this department is farmers, now it's over to you. And that worries wildlife groups.
If you speak to any experts on badgers, actually there's still a lot of ambiguity about how many badgers there even are in the country. Nobody really knows, there's no precise figure. And they're talking about how they have to have a 70% reduction in badgers in order for this to work. But nobody knows what 70% is. 70% of what? So I don't think this is something that can be controlled.
Campaigners argue vaccinating badgers and tougher restrictions on cattle will stop TB more effectively. But now it will be several years and several thousand dead badgers before we find out who's right.
And that was our science editor, Tom Clark. Well, with me now in the studio is guitarist Brian May, who's been an active part of the Team Badger campaign against culling. And from the farm in Gloucestershire, his farm that we just saw in that report, we're joined by Jan Rowe, a spokesman for the National Farmers Union and a director of one of the companies issued with a licence to carry out the cull. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Jan. First of all, when will you actually start culling? And how many herds have you had to destroy as a result of bovine TB?
Well, we don't know exactly when we'll start culling, but it should be relatively soon, sometime in the next few weeks. In terms of my own experience, we've had TB in our herd for the last 25 years, but the last 12 years we've only had about 6 months free of it. We've lost about 180 cattle over that period of time, but it's probably cost me over £500,000 to live with bovine TB.
£500,000, and are you confident that by culling the badgers you will actually get rid of the disease in your herds in the future? Because the science isn't very clear on this, is it?
It will move us towards a position where we should be able to use vaccines with much more confidence. Vaccines are just not ready at this stage, and what we need is a cull in the interim period, followed up by vaccination of probably both badgers and cattle at the same time, in the nearish future, 5 to 6 years' time, probably.
Okay, Brian May, turning to you. I mean, you were shaking your head there when you heard that. But hang on a minute. He's lost £500,000. That's an awful lot of money for running his business, possibly crippling for some farmers.
That's right. We
How
all
can
want
you
to solve
deny
it.
him to take those measures if that saves his business and his herds?
I deny it because this cannot solve the problem. And Jan's basically admitted, you know, that it won't solve the problem. You asked him a very direct question. Will this solve the... Excuse me, I need to talk now. You asked him a direct question, which he didn't answer. There is no way this cull can eradicate bovine TB. The only thing in the long term which can achieve this is vaccination, first of badgers and also of cows. This has to be the way we approach things.
But even the vaccination science isn't entirely clear, is it? I think, as far as I understand, it's only clear on vaccinating the cattle, but not on the badgers.
Well, you know, we vaccinate our children. You know, you hear all these arguments from the government and the NFU about, you know, vaccination isn't going to work. If we didn't think BCG worked, why would we be vaccinating human beings? That's why we have an immunity in humans. That's what we need in the cattle population.
Okay,
right,
well,
Jan?
let's put this to Jan then. What about vaccination? Why kill all those badgers when, as we said before, the science isn't entirely clear on it? In fact, it might cost you more than it will save.
It might make things
and
also
hang on a minute.
worse.
Hang on, let's just put the question to him and just go for the vaccination now.
The big problem with vaccines at the moment is the only vaccine that you have licensed is an injectable vaccine for badgers. You don't have any license that's legal to use in cattle at the moment. Injectable vaccine for badgers means you've got to catch every single one of them and inject them for at least 5 years before you start getting any significant effect. You have to catch all the young ones, and you never will do with cage trapping. So vaccine in its current form is probably very unlikely to progress the immunisation of the badgers very much, and it'll cost a fortune to do. We need an oral bait vaccine for badgers, and we need to run it alongside a legal vaccine for cattle. We don't dismiss vaccines.
Right.
What we're saying is they're just not ready for use at the moment.
But in the meantime, hang on a minute, in the meantime, what you're advocating, what you're going to be participating in, is a massacre of wildlife in the British countryside with unproven results for what you're worried about.
That's not actually true. We know that an effectively run cull will significantly reduce cattle TB, probably way beyond the 16%
No, you don't,
estimate.
Jan. You do not know
Let it
this.
finish.
That's after 9 years. We know from work done in Ireland, we know even from the scientific trials that at the end of the culling period we got nearly a 50% reduction in TB in cattle, and that lasted for, it's still actually lasting now, although it's slowly waning. So there is a significant benefit from culling.
Brian?
It's incredible that Jan is quoting from a scientific report. And the scientific report itself said unequivocally that culling badgers cannot meaningfully contribute to the control of bovine TB in badgers. The man who organised that cull, Lord Krebs, actually today in an interview said, this cull is crazy. He used the word crazy. He said, we should be vaccinating. We should be putting all our resources into vaccinating and not killing our wildlife.
Is it not
How can you justify this?
Can I put something else to Jan? I just wonder, Jan, at the moment, if your herds are destroyed by bovine TB, or rather you have to destroy them to stop the spread of the disease, you get compensation from the government. Are you afraid that once the ball is in your court and you cull the badgers, that in the future the compensation will be a lot less? Because this is costing the taxpayer a lot of money.
We know that is actually quite likely to be the case anyway, because of budget problems that the government have, that compensation.
But that's a trap for you then, isn't it?
But it is a very dangerous trap, but on the other hand, compensation is going to be cut whatever we do. What we're saying is we need to get on and fight this disease. It's not badgers per se we're fighting, it's the disease of bovine TB, and it's a serious disease that's moving into all sorts of other animals as well as cattle.
Yes, it is.
So
Where is it going to stop, Jan? Are you going to kill every wild animal, or are you going to solve this problem in the farming?
Let me ask you one final question, Brian, because we're running out of time. They're going to start the cull, whether you like it or not. What are you going to do with the campaign from here on?
Campaign starts, it's called Team Badger, and for the first time ever in Britain, every single wildlife charity and animal charity has got together. It is Team Badger. We're at teambadger.org. And first of all, we are mounting a petition which is already running in the government petition site. We hope to get 100,000 signatures. We got 20,000 in the past couple of days. And we hope to be able to force a debate on this in the House, because it's a terrible, terrible tragedy that's about to unfold.
And
here.
just very briefly, would you take part in any direct action?
No, the action I'm taking is here. I don't go out in the field. You know, I talk, I speak, and I argue for the truth and for mercy, for decency, Jan.
Well, Jan Rowe, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Brian May, same to you.